Scope height, levels, BDCs, and annealing this week on Mail Call Mondays. I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Here on another Monday with a lot of good questions. A couple of them are a little bit of a rehash of previous questions we've had, but when they come up time and time again, I feel that maybe there's something I haven't been covering correctly on them, or maybe you guys just have further questions on them. So we're going to hit scope height again. Matthew asks, I've always heard to have your scope or optical plane as close to the bore axis as possible. I see a lot of systems where they run the scope super high. What are the possible negative aspects of this? Well, first of all, we need to examine why we're trying to get our scope closest to the bore. On a system like a regular bolt-action rifle with a hunting stock and a traditional comb on it, your cheek sits very low in relation to the axis of the bore. If you try to put a scope really high, like I see some guys do with extra high rings or something of that nature, now instead of getting a nice good cheek weld, you're getting a chin weld. Your face is just really high on that stock to try to get your eye at the correct position behind the optics. This is not really good for a couple of reasons. First of all, it just makes the size of the overall system larger than it needs to be. That top to bottom height is a lot larger than you could have it at. The second problem is when you are just getting a chin weld, you're just getting part of that chin, your face has a whole lot of ability to move around left to right, front to back, and it's not a good, consistent place to be. When we get behind the scope, we want our face, our eyeball in the exact same spot every single time. This reduces parallax, this reduces shadowing in the scope, and can cause you all kinds of optical errors that will throw off your point of aim downrange. So we want a nice tight cheek weld. We want to get in there and really, the gold standard is if you can fall asleep behind your rifle and your head not move from the stock, that's where you want it to be. And you want the optic placed where it needs to be to correspond to that cheek weld. So you get your cheek weld first and then place the optic. Now when we switch over to AR type systems like the one I have here, now we run into some issues. The stock is straight off the back of the rifle, so the comb is actually higher than the center of the bore, which naturally means that your scope is going to be higher. Now you're limited to this. You can't drop this tube down any further, so you have to raise the optic up to get the appropriate height. You don't want to go too high again. You still want to get that nice cheek weld, but the optic in front of me here, this has a 44 millimeter objective. Actually, I take that back. This has a 42 millimeter objective. This is the FSW-FA 3-15 by 42. So with a 42 millimeter objective, we can still get down here fairly low. When you start getting up into these great big huge 55, 60, 70 millimeter objectives, now you're pushing the optical system up again, and that will then require that you have some kind of riser on your stock. So we still want to keep it low to get that good cheek weld on AR type systems. Now when we switch over to bolt-action chassis systems like the Cadex Strike 30 here in front of me, we have kind of an interesting mix of things going on here. First of all, we are limited by this top rail. Now on the Cadex system, we have an inclined 20-minute rail. So that means the front of the rail is going to be lower than the back of the rail. This raises up the section of the rail that the optic sits on in order to get that full 20-minute angle cant without running out of rail space up here. That again raises everything up higher over your bore. Now on this system, it doesn't matter because I can just pinch the little adjustment here and I can raise the comb up to wherever I need it and it locks in. So I can get that comb dialed back in to where my eye is exactly where I need it. Additionally, with a system like this, I can run the cheek piece forward and back to also get that forward edge right where I need it. This will kind of negate the problems that you run into with raising the optic up over the bore. Now, when we start talking about the ballistic issues that you can encounter, most of them are dialed out when you make your dope cards. You will put in your height over bore, and on Remington systems we have a really cool way to do this. The gas vent hole right here on the receiver is about midline with the bore, so you can measure from that hole to the center of your scope. If you have split rings, you can measure to the center of the ring. If you have a system like this, you can measure to the center of the turret, and that will give you a very close approximation of your height over bore for your ballistic calculators. When you dial them into the ballistic calculators, and the ballistic calculator gives you a solution, that takes out any consideration of your height over bore. You no longer have to worry about it. Now, for law enforcement or military situations where you may have to take a across the room shot in a live scenario, then you have to come back if you're running 100 yards zero, and you have to factor in your height over bore, because that's going to have what's called mechanical offset on your target. You'll want to do something like place the crosshairs at the hairline in order for the bullet to impact in the T-zone. So that is something that you'll have to take into account with the height over bore. But for most of what we do, for most competitions, height over bore is a non-issue once you've had the measurement and once you have dialed your cheek weld in. So on traditionally stocked hunting rifles, yes, get that scope as low as you possibly can without having the bell strike the barrel, and that will allow you to get the most consistent cheek weld possible. On tactical rifles with adjustable cheek pieces or on AR systems, then you can do a lot of adjustment to factor that out and not have it be a problem anymore. I hope that gives you a little bit of insight onto why some people will say that you want the scope mount as low as possible and why on other systems it really isn't a big issue. Drew asks, scope levels in the field, are they worth it? Well, Drew, I've had this discussion with one of our other viewers. Really, I don't find scope levels that useful on standard range rifles from 0 to 1,000 yards or even slightly beyond that. I don't really find scope levels useful. I don't put scope levels on my rifles if they don't have them. In fact, the one that came with our Razor HD, I gave it away to a friend because it never came out of the box. I really didn't see any reason to put that level on the rifle. It adds weight, it adds size to the system, it hangs off the side. It just wasn't something that I wanted to use. Your body is equipped with a very efficient leveling system. Your inner ears are designed to keep your body level at all times. That combined with your eyes work very efficiently to keep objects level in your field of view. That combined with the fact your scope has this lovely horizontal crosshair should allow you to get that leveled out using your internal means without any mechanical means. Now, we are all designed differently. I know there are guys out there that couldn't hang a picture straight to save their lives. If you're one of those guys and you just absolutely cannot get things straight and level, then a scope level may be a good idea. But I would hesitate to recommend anything that hangs out of the side of the rifle because that's going to get damaged. Be very careful with these levels that pivot and swivel that you flip in and out, because there is the ability for those to wear and to get some play in them, and then you're not looking at a perfectly level anymore. If you're going to go that route, then I suggest looking into scope mounts or rings that have the level built in. We are wrapping up the review on an Adland Engineering odd mount that has a bubble level built into the back of it. We have a spur mount right here on this rifle that also has the bubble level built into the back of it. So you can get the benefits of the bubble level without any added weight or added expense. It comes in the mount, it's no big deal. Now, when you're using these levels, the problem that you run into is when you're looking at the level, you need to be in that tight firing position. You need to be able to see the level while you're in position and then simply glance at your crosshair and engage the target. If you have a level to where you have to move your head or you have to look over the scope to see the level and get things leveled out, when you get back on that rifle, the rifle's no longer in the exact same position it was. Unless you're in a situation where you have a very hard surface that you're working on and you have a bipod that you can lock solidly, then once you get that level out, any movement in the gun is going to set that level off balance again. So a level in the back of the mount like this I think is really good because I can see it with my non-shooting eye while I'm actually looking through the rifle. So it's nothing to glance down at the level and glance back up through the scope without changing any position at all. Now, as I said, on close to intermediate range systems, 0 to 1,000 yards, I don't see a lot of benefit at all. If you are shooting a 50 or a 338 LM or any of those extreme long range systems, you want every advantage that you can possibly have. So in those systems, they're so large and they're so weighty that an extra little bit for a level isn't going to hurt you that much. So go ahead and put one on there, because when you start getting out at those really long distances, then everything is magnified. Any little bit of cant can be magnified. So they may be a good idea on that, especially if you notice a problem. So I'm not going to say, across the board that levels are bad. I'm going to say that I don't use them on most of my rifles. I have some that have levels on, but it's not because I put the level on. It's because that they came already built into another piece of equipment that I installed onto the rifle. So I hope that gives you some insight on that. Edgar asks, so what's better, 308 or 30-06? Well, my answer to that, Edgar, is what do you like better, chocolate or vanilla? It's really... if you are hand loading, you can pull out a little bit of extra performance from the 30-06. If you're not hand loading and you're shooting factory ammo, then they're very similar between the two. You can get some heavier loads in the 30-06. You can get some good hunting loads in the 30-06, but you can get a lot of the same performance out of the 308. The 308 has the benefits of being a short action, shorter bolt throw. You have a greater variety of match ammunition. You have a greater variety of ammunition, period, available for the 308. Now, if you are hand loading, then you can really push the envelope with the 30-06 and you can get more velocity. You can launch heavier, higher ballistic coefficient bullets with the 30-06 than you can with the 308. However, if you're going to go to that extent, why not go to a 300 Win Mag? The 30-06 really ends up being this in-between cartridge. It really, on the low end, you can get the same performance out of the 308. On the high end, though, it doesn't come close to the performance of the 300 Win Mag. So you have to balance that out there. If you're going to go ahead and you're going to accept the drawbacks of a long action, a longer bolt throw, larger cartridges, etc., might as well go with the 300 Win Mag. If you want the advantages of a lightweight compact rifle with a ton of ammunition available for it, then go with the 308. Now, I do have two rifles that are chambered in 30-06, not because I chose to chamber them in 30-06, but that's because what they came in natively chambered. So, I do shoot 30-06 occasionally. I load for 30-06, but really, my preference is for 308 until we start really needing performance that the 308 doesn't offer. And in that case, I'm generally just going to go to a totally different cartridge whatsoever. I'm not going to just bump up to the 30-06. It's a classic cartridge. If you have an M1 Garand or if you have a 1903 Springfield, they're good to go. If not, take a look at really the performance that you're trying to get, and then find a cartridge that can do that for you instead of trying to decide between those two. James asks, your opinion on BDC scopes / reticles. Do they have a place in the precision world, or are they more of a gimmick? Well, James, it really depends on the type of BDC that we're talking about. It seems nowadays we have two different varieties of BDCs. We have the hunting type BDCs where you just buy a scope and it says, this is a BDC for a 223 or this is a BDC for a 308, etc. And in that case, they are really not very exact. They're not very precise. They're not something that I would take out and use at a precision rifle match. BDCs, be it a BDC reticle or a BDC turret, are really designed for one specific load. It's designed for a specific bullet traveling at a specific velocity. When you vary from that specific bullet or specific velocity, now you'll start to get a divergence between your actual trajectory and what the BDC thinks you should. Now, depending upon the ranges that you're shooting, the divergence may be very, very small. That's one of the reasons that the BDC in, for instance, the ACOG on an M4 works very well and can work for a wide variety of ammo, because you're generally shooting that system at 600 in, and all that ammo is very close in velocity and performance. If you try to take that same BDC and you try to shoot it to 1,000 yards, you're going to see a drastic difference. Now, there can be a very good purpose for a BDC, for one of the custom BDCs you can get, for instance, from Vortex, where you go in, you calculate your BDC, you write all the information out, you send it to them, and they will custom mark a turret for you for your load. So then you can take that turret that is now designed to shoot a specific cartridge, a specific bullet, a specific velocity in a specific set of weather conditions, and you know that is good to go. So if you're hunting in the same spot, same time of year, same rifle, same cartridge, and the weather's about the same every time you go shooting there, you can have a turret designed for that situation, and you can drop it on the rifle before you go. Now, for people like me, I experiment with stuff all the time. I change setups all the time. I try different bullets, try different loads, try different velocities. I don't see a benefit with a BDC because I will constantly be having to find a correction for that BDC. Whereas now with mil reticle and mil turrets, I just simply plug it into a ballistic computer or plug it into JBM Ballistics, print out a dope card that corresponds perfectly with the load that I have, and there's no adjustment based on it. I can just dial it in and go. So I don't find a real advantage to BDCs, but there are people out there, they're specifically oriented towards people that don't want to get into the nuts and bolts. They don't want to go into ballistic computers or ballistic calculators. They just want to grab their rifle, go out, point it at a target, dial in their yard range, and hit the target. So if that's you, they're good to go. You won't see a whole lot of them out at precision rifle matches because we tend to need a higher degree of precision than BDCs are capable of in varying conditions. John asked, you talked about the Hornady 178 grain BTHP being your favorite 1,000-yard 308 bullet. Is there something about a good 1,000-yard bullet that can make it not as great for shorter yardages? Well, John, specifically when referring to the 178 grain Hornady BTHP or the Hornady AMAX, that bullet works extremely well at long range and at close ranges as well. Now, when we get into bullets that work better at longer range than at close range, it's going to depend upon your rifle as much as the bullet itself. I have seen bullets in a 1 in 12 twist, like the 155 grain Lapua Cinar, that will actually group tighter at 200 yards than they group at 100 yards. There is a great debate on why this is. There's a term, I believe it's epicyclic swerve, that has been used to try to explain it. I recently read a paper from Brian Litz that kind of dispelled that. So I'm still out there. I'm not quite certain why some bullets will group tighter at 200 yards than they will at 100 yards, but I've seen in a Remington 1 in 12 barrel that the Lapua 155 Cinar will throw a slightly tighter group at 200 yards time and time again than it will at 100 yards. So that's a good example of a bullet that is better suited to longer ranges. However, it's an excellent long range bullet, and once you get out past 100 yards, you're doing good. Now, when I say it will group tighter at 200 yards than 100 yards, we're not talking about great inaccuracies. We're talking about maybe it will group at 1 MOA at 100 yards, but it'll group 1.5 MOA at, or I'm sorry, it'll group under 1 MOA at 200 yards. So a 1-inch group at 100 yards, and it'll print a 1.5-inch group at 200 yards, where you would have expected to see a 2-inch group. So that's an example of that. I tend to try to shy away from bullets that will do that, so that if I'm shooting at a match and they have a 50-yard stage or they have a 100-yard paper stage where you have to really get that razor's edge performance, I'm not trying to juggle different loads in the same rifle. I can use the same load for whatever stage that we're at. So keep that in mind. In any rifle, if you're setting up a load for that specific rifle, test it at varying different yard lines. You're going to want to do that anyway to confirm your dope, but maybe before you settle on that load, load up a couple variations and shoot them at different yard lines. So I hope that gives you a little bit more insight to that. Justin wanted to know, are reduced size targets a good training tool when you don't have access to more than 100-yard range? Well, when you're not able to shoot beyond 100 yards, you do need to get creative with your training, and shooting at smaller and smaller targets can help try to bring your concentration in. But usually when we're shooting precision rifles, we're shooting at targets that are the razor's edge of what the rifle is capable of. So if you're already shooting at 1/4-inch dots at 100 yards, then trying to reduce those further is not really going to help you out a whole lot. What I recommend is, if you are limited to 100 yards, then you need to put stress and you need to put instability into your training to be able to raise that stress level and raise that skill level. You can't really do wind doping at 100 yards unless you've got a .22 trainer or you're shooting subsonic ammo through your standard rifle. But you can go out there and you can do stuff like speed drills, where you need to stand, drop down, get on the rifle real fast, and engage as quickly as you can. You can set targets wider apart at 100 yards, so you have to transition from one target to the other and reacquire that body position quickly. You can shoot offhand, you can shoot positional, you can shoot from barricades, all at 100 yards. And those are all things that you can do to help raise your game while you're limited to a short range. Ian asks, case annealing, is it necessary with good quality brass? Ian, yes, case annealing is going to be advantageous with any kind of brass that you're using. All brass will work harden, and all annealing is doing is you're trying to remove that work hardening. You're trying to soften the shoulder and the neck back up so that there's less chance of it cracking, and so it so it resizes better. So annealing will work for any quality of brass. Doesn't matter if you're using super expensive brass or if you're using range pickup brass. As long as it's brass, annealing will help you out. Jerry asks, I would like info on the proper use of a chronograph and logging your FPS to create your charts. Well, Jerry, I don't do anything crazy when I am checking velocities. Most ballistic calculators and ballistic programs are set up with the chronograph 10 foot from the muzzle of your rifle. I'm not sure why that seems to be an industry standard. I do know that 10 foot from the muzzle gives you a lower chance of muzzle blast affecting your readings. I have seen in the past, if I get a really violent rifle and get that chronograph a little bit too close, that it'll just flash error when I fire a shot across it, because I was blowing dust, dirt, grass, etc. through the chronograph as well, and it just goofs everything up. 10 feet, I don't seem to really have that problem. When you are logging your velocities, make sure you shoot at least 5 shots over the chronograph. That way you get a decent spread. 10 shots is better, and then average those velocities for when you're plugging into your ballistic calculator. Also, make sure you log the weather. You want to log the temperature, the barometric pressure, the humidity, and also you want to log the light conditions, because some chronographs are affected by light. So make sure you log if it was cloudy, if it was sunny, if it was clear, etc. All that information will help you look back through your logbooks later on if you're having a problem. So hopefully that will help you out. Beyond that, I don't do anything crazy, anything scientific. In fact, anymore, the biggest concern I have is not shooting the chronograph. So I'll take a little bit of extra time when I set up and step back and check to make sure that the barrel is not pointed at the screen. When we're running high scope over bore systems like this, it's very easy to adjust the rifle so that you're looking cleanly through the screens with the scope, but have the barrel too low and nick the top of the chronograph. So make sure that you check that. It may be a good idea to pull the bolt out and actually look down the barrel to make sure you're not seeing your screen in the middle of the barrel. Daniel sends us, can I shoot 7.62 by 51 through my 308 commercial rifle? Well, Daniel, that depends. There's a lot of 7.62 surplus out there. It comes from varying sources, and there are a lot of different 308 chambers out there. If you get a tight 308 chamber, it may not like 7.62. If you get 7.62 that's really on the outer end of its specs, it may not chamber. If the cartridge will chamber, you're going to be safe to fire. So if you can actually lock it down inside your rifle, then you're going to be good to go. If you can't lock it down, if you can't get that bolt closed, then it may be a problem. So definitely buy a small lot of it if you're trying to figure it out. Chamber a couple cartridges before you buy 2 cases of the stuff. Robert asks, have you used cast bullets for competition, or are they better for target practice? Well, Robert, by cast bullets, I assume you're talking about cast lead. And in IDPA or IPSC or any of the pistol competitions, it's very common for guys to use cast lead bullets because they are lower cost than copper jacketed bullets. Pistol competition, though, is those pistols are usually fairly low velocity. Most of them are subsonic. Some of them are just over the sound barrier. And so you're not really worried about how hard those lead bullets are. Now, I don't do lead casting, so I can't get into all the different formulations to make the bullets harder or softer. I just know that they're not a problem shooting in handguns with the exception of Glocks. Glock cautions not to shoot lead bullets in their factory barrels. When we get into rifle competition, we are talking about a whole different ball game. Your average 308 is shooting at least Mach 2, at least 2 times the speed of sound. 2400 to 2600 is normal for 308s. Trying to shoot a lead bullet at 2 times the speed of sound is not going to give you very good results. They're really too soft. They're not going to engage the rifling well. You're just going to leave a lot of crap in the barrel. So I really would not recommend doing it. I don't know anybody that actually shoots lead bullets at rifle velocities, full power rifle velocities. Now, I have heard of guys that will load lead bullets for high powered rifles when they're shooting reduced velocity indoor because it won't tear up backstops as badly as jacketed bullets. It really is very easy on the bore of the rifle, but they're not trying to shoot a full high power competition with lead bullets. So to directly answer your question, absolutely not. I would not use cast lead bullets in competition. I would always use jacketed copper bullets at a minimum. Usually I'm using match bullets, which are a thin copper jacket over a lead core and held to a very, very high degree of tolerance, more than likely a higher degree than I would be capable of making here at home. Takashi asks, how many precision rifles do you really need? Well, that really all depends upon what you consider a need. If we're going strictly on the definition of need, then I would say you need as many precision rifles as the different disciplines that you shoot that require it. However, most of us really don't work on need. Take a look at your average city street and see how many SUVs drive down the street and ask yourself, do those people really need those SUVs? Here in America, we don't really function a whole lot on need. We function on want and affordability. If we want it and we can afford it, then that's a whole lot different than if we need it. I know I personally could get away with probably 2 rifles for the stuff that I shoot. Since the AE Mark II can switch barrels very quickly between calibers, then I could probably get away with just a 223 and the AE Mark II, so I can switch between them. However, I really don't want to be stuck in that ability. Much like golf clubs, I really want a bag of tools that I can go through and grab whatever I want for whatever situation I tend to be in, or whatever I think I'm going to encounter. So I really prefer to have several different rifles for several different configurations. Sean asks, recently you said that you ordered a new barrel. What specifications would I need to provide to a barrel maker in order to order a new barrel? Thanks and great shows. Well, Sean, you were talking specifically, I believe, about the 260 Remington AAC SD barrel that I purchased. I picked that up off of Midway, and that is actually a stock barrel. What AAC did is they contacted a barrel manufacturer and they had them turn this barrel specifically to their specs, which would cover the widest variety of Remington 700s. Now the headspace still has to be set on that barrel, but they use a novel way of setting the headspace. They want you to either buy a larger lug or grind your current lug narrower depending upon what your headspace requirements are. So you're setting the length of the headspace by the barrel lug. You're basically using it like you would use a shim kit to install a muzzle device. If you install it with the factory lug and you find that you have too much headspace, that it closes on the no-go gauge, then you're going to take that lug off, you're going to grind it down until it does not close on the no-go gauge. If you go in there and you put in your go gauge and the bolt won't close on the go gauge, then they want you to purchase a thicker lug and have that lug ground specifically to fit the headspace. So that's how we get away with ordering a barrel without any specs at all. I don't know how well it's going to work. That's going to be a project that we are going to have to wait and see how well the whole deal sets up. I haven't talked to a whole lot of guys that have actually used these. These barrels are getting hard to find, so I don't know if they were really well received or not. Now, if you are ordering a barrel from a manufacturer, then what you're generally going to have to do is you're going to have to ship your action to that barrel smith and have them turn the barrel for your action. When they do that, if you send it off to any of the custom shops, they're probably going to want to true your action, which is going to change some dimensions anyway, and then they're going to cut the barrel specifically for that action. Sometimes in truing, they will open the threads up in the barrel a little bit to get the threads perfectly concentric to the bore and to the center line of the action. When they do that, your factory barrel will no longer fit. So the threads on the barrel have to be cut to the threads in the receiver now. Factory Remingtons have a broad range of tolerances, so you really can't just order up a barrel and screw it on your factory Remington without any changes. You run into the issues that we've seen. So a lot of barrel manufacturers are not willing to do that. Now specifically, for instance, GA Precision, they will allow you to send your receiver in. They will true it, they'll install a barrel on it, they will save the print from your receiver. So they've got all the specs from your receiver. So when you get it home, when you shoot that barrel out, you can call them up and say, hey, I need a new barrel for this rifle with this serial number. And they look the print up and they can then cut you a barrel and send it to you without you having to send your receiver back. I've talked to them about that in the past. And for a barrel burning caliber like a 243, that's a great option. But they have already taken your receiver, they have already checked all the dimensions, and they have those on hand. Now rifles like our Accuracy International AE Mark II, those are held to such a tight spec that barrel manufacturers can send you a barrel that is built to another set of specs, and it will screw into your rifle, and it will be very, very close. It still will not be as exact as a custom barrel manufacturer installing the barrel, but it will be close enough that when you fire form brass for that chamber now, you don't have any problems going forward from that, and you don't have any problems shooting factory ammunition in it. So those are something to take into consideration when you're looking at a new barrel. Just consider you will usually have to send your action in to get that barrel set up for it. Jeffrey asks, how will putting an XLR on my Savage affect accuracy with the weight reduction? Well, Jeffrey, installing an XLR chassis on your rifle is not going to affect the accuracy. A weight reduction on a rifle, though, however, may affect the amount of perceived recoil that is hitting you in the shoulder. An increase in perceived recoil may affect your ability to drive the gun. Now, this may be offset by the ability of the XLR chassis to adjust for your specific body type. So since you can adjust that butt pad to wherever you need it, you can adjust the length of pull and all these other things, then instead of having the rifle want to lever up with your old stock or with a traditional type stock, you may get that straight push right back into your shoulder, which may lessen your perception of it. It's all going to depend upon how you feel when you're driving the gun afterwards. But as far as a strict accuracy change, the rifle is not going to change any. It's just your ability to run that gun. Daniel asks, what are the pros and cons to both muzzle brakes and ported barrels and the difference between the two? Daniel, I can go into the broad difference between the two, but the pros and cons are going to be based solely upon the designs of the brakes or porting themselves. So we really can't cover that because there's such a vast array out there. Now, brakes generally are screwed onto your barrel and they direct the muzzle blast to the sides and sometimes up as well. They are not limited to the outside diameter of the barrel, so they can be very large. If you look at things like the JP recoil eliminators, those are usually much larger than the actual barrel that they're on. So those give a whole lot more baffle area to work. They can be a whole lot more efficient. When you look into ported barrels are generally restricted to the diameter of the barrel that you're starting out with. They don't really get into crazy baffle design. They're usually just holes either wire EDM'd or drilled into the barrel to help redirect the forces. Using a broad generalization, which I generally hate to do, brakes seem to be more efficient than ported muzzles. However, ported muzzles, now you don't have extra weight, you don't have extra length, and all this nonsense hanging off of them. So it's going to be really the exact pros and cons are going to be limited from design to design. But in competition where recoil elimination is really a big deal, you will generally see more brakes. In hunting type environments where you just want a little bit of recoil reduction, but maybe you don't want the added sound coming back to the shooter, you'll see a whole lot more ported muzzles. That's about as general as I can get it without picking specific brakes and porting designs. I don't have any ported barrels here because brakes just are better suited to what I do. Robert asks, accuracy with and without a muzzle brake. Well, your accuracy should not change at all if you have a properly installed, properly designed muzzle brake. All the brake is doing is stripping the gases away that are trying to follow the bullet out of the muzzle, and they are redirecting them in a different direction. So you might see a very, very tiny bit of accuracy increase because instead of all those gases striking the base of the bullet, they're helping to be directed in opposite directions. However, I haven't noticed a difference on rifles that I have shot and then installed a brake. I've never shot a rifle, installed a brake, and actually seen an accuracy increase. The claims are really all academic as far as I'm concerned. I understand the claims. When I look at them, theoretically the claims have merits, but I haven't been able to test them in the field, probably because I don't have the degree of equipment that would be able to test them in the field. Now, you can get an accuracy reduction if the muzzle device is not properly designed or if the muzzle device is not properly installed. Properly designed muzzle device is going to equally direct those gases away from the bullet. If you have a great imbalance on one side or the other, that can cause instability on the bullet and it may run into problems. The greater problem that you run into, though, is if the muzzle device is installed improperly and improperly torqued, then you can get some stretching or deforming of that last little bit of barrel. That last little bit of rifling gets deformed, then you can really have some issues. Or if you have a muzzle device that was improperly sized or improperly drilled for the caliber that you're using, you can get a baffle strike just like you would with a suppressor, where that bullet just nicks the side of the break as it goes out. Now, it may be so small that you don't even notice it on the rifle end of it, but downrange you will see a drastic difference. You may really see your groups off to one side. You may actually run into a situation where you bury your windage on your scope trying to get the rifle adjusted back onto target. So if you have a rifle that was previously zeroed and you were good to go, and you install a muzzle device and now all of a sudden you see that you're burying your windage to try to get it zeroed back on target, take a look at your muzzle device. You may be getting a baffle strike, or it may be cross-threaded. You may have some serious problems that are kicking that bullet off to the side. So that's generally what I see. But as far as a pure accuracy increase or decrease, not so much. It comes back to the previous question that we answered in this episode about the chassis. A muzzle device like a brake can remove a lot of perceived recoil, and that in turn can help you shoot the rifle better. The opposite can also occur. A muzzle device like a brake can reflect that blast back towards the shooter a whole lot more. It can make you more prone to flinching, and that can cause a problem. I know when I take short-barreled braked rifles and I try to shoot them from the ground with any kind of obstacle near me, then that blast wave really comes back and hits you in the head. And while you're not getting a whole lot of recoil from the rifle moving backwards, the concussion is a whole lot more painful than the rifle recoiling into your shoulder. So that is something to keep in mind. That's all the questions we have for this Mail Call Monday. Thanks for joining us, and please, if you've enjoyed the episode, make sure you click that thumbs up button and share our episode. If you've got any questions for next Mail Call Monday, do us a favor and first head over to our webpage, and we'll leave a link down below, and take a look at the topics that we have covered in previous Mail Call Mondays. We're going to start making sure we leave that link down there so that you guys can take a look at our answers previously before you ask a question. That way, if you still have a question about it and you want us to clarify something, then we can do so, but we're not just rehashing the same questions over and over again. If you've got a question or comment, leave it in the comment section below or send it to us on Facebook or Twitter. When we ask questions, we will usually ask them on our Facebook page a couple of days before we start producing the Mail Call Mondays episode. So make sure you go over and like us on Facebook. If you're a subscriber, thank you very much. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. It helps us out, helps our numbers go up, and helps show manufacturers that you guys like what we're doing. And until next time, get out and shoot!